two apologies in starting out my talk today. Number one is I don't teach history anymore. So my talk on the post office is not as much history as it is anecdotes, which I thought might kind of liven it up and be more fun to hear. The history you can get in Alice Ronsley's wonderful book, A Place Called Terrace Park. A lot of you probably have this book. And if you don't, you know what? I probably will pass it around because I have other notes. The other one is, I've been well all winter until today. My voice is going and so is a cold coming on. So I apologize, but I don't think it's anything that you haven't heard from me before. The original Terrace Park Post Office occupied a house at 411 Terrace Place. It was built around 1886 as part of the J.B. Sibley division. And probably some of us even remember that Sibley family. I know I do, and I imagine, Leslie, do you kind of remember that name? I thought maybe you would. The first owner of the post office was Harriet Gagner, and she served as the postmaster of Terrace Park. This was the first thing I found out in compiling my report is postmistress is a misnomer. Everybody is a postmaster, or an OIC, and that would be officer in charge. There was a store that was kept on that property from 1891 until 1903. And for a short while, the village council met on the second floor of Mrs. Gagner's house. And during the next few years, the post office had several keepers and locations until about 1925, and that's when Lillian Drescher held the post office for the next 25 years, living in the rear of the house while running the post office and the store in front. And here's the Blessed Lady putting the stamps on. There's the old, in fact, we have a wonderful blow-up of the old post office, and there she is sorting the mail. So I'd like to pass these out too. Let's see those. Probably one of the most tragic things is when I've been talking to different people regarding the post office is that during the Ohio Historic Inventory in 1980, the original post office building was considered eligible to be on the National Register. But, like so many of our historic sites around here, it was demolished in 1990 and replaced by the brick building that was Graduate Services at that time, and that's at 211 Terrace Place. Now it is owned by David Bowen, and it is the red brick building that's office building. Ironically, this building probably housed building and loan, maybe even Board of Education meetings, and here I am giving the report, and I know my dad was in audience in this building when it was some of those former sites. And now my husband, Dick Mileham, is in office at through David Bowen, so he's here too. And that will give you the site of the new post office as it was. And probably many years ago, the first post office was presumably down at the Miami Grove Nature Preserve, because Mr. John Smith owned that whole area. I figure it's the Lindell property. Some of you all can tell me better. But he was one of our first Ohio senators, and there was a whole metropolis of businesses and farms, and that's where the first post office was sited. That was probably, I do have a date on that, May 14th, 1804. After Mrs. Drescher came Effie Miller for 20-some years. I'm giving you kind of a synopsis of some of the postmasters that were there for a longer period of time and where I received some of my anecdotes. Effie, bless her heart, Stan, her husband, gave us probably all the memorabilia we have today in our archives or is down at the Terrace Park Historical Society. Stanley Miller, memorabilia. That's just been in my mind forever because he's been so good. And of course, Effie was there for a long time, and they finally, when she left, they did a flagpole in her memory. And when we all were growing up and Effie was the postmaster, we knew she read the mail. So we all sent postcards, postcards to each other, friends, whatever, family, and we'd say, "Hi, Effie, this is what we're doing in, not the Bahamas, not Florida, someplace probably in Gatlinburg or something like that." Anyway, some of my composed anecdotes come from how the Terrace Park Post Office did influence the lives of so many of us. And I have evidence of that through Amy Evans, who did a book on her dog, Ray. She's an artist, local artist. We have some of her work down at Terrace Park Historical Society. And the one post office site she did was when Rags goes to the post office, he is very happy. Why? Because Rhonda, our beloved postmaster, the lady there gives him a treat. Do you have a favorite place to go? And you will see that in Amy's book. Also, we received a great letter. I chuckle because this is memory too. He's not that much older than I, but Black Douglas. And I thought I'd read excerpts from his letter on the Terrace Park Post Office. As kids, we were at the post office every day. First reason, we had to pick up the mail. Second reason, that's where everybody, all the other kids went. Probably like where we all had some of our kids hang out at the Kingwick or whatever until they weren't allowed to. There was no mail delivery. I can still remember the combination of box number 7. I cannot tell you the numbers, but if they had the old boxes still there, I bet I could turn the knob correctly. Sometimes grown-ups would be at the post office or they were buying groceries at Louis', which Patty will tell you about shortly. In a couple of days, from 3 to 5, you would see everyone in Terrace Park. Shut-ins, as they were called, had their mail picked up and their groceries brought by their neighbors. And this is the mailbox that Rhonda took before they discarded all the mailboxes. And somebody, I think upon her retirement, either she had it done or they made a bank for her out of that. Flack's words about Mrs. Drescher was that, and he kept using postmistress, I had to correct him on that, not a pleasant person. But now, this is one person. She was always impatient with us, can't imagine why, as we hung around on Fridays to buy the latest comic books, because she was running a grocery store at that time too. We thought she stalled putting them out just to irritate us. I still think she did do that to irritate us. The postmaster job was political, and Mrs. Drescher was one of the few Democrats in Terrace Park, even then. Her husband was a Republican and had been the postmaster until Roosevelt beat Hoover. She had been postmaster all our lives, like Joe Louis was the only heavyweight champion we ever knew. The post office was a railroad house. The wonderful 3-story houses that were some of the first homes scattered throughout the park. The same house was where my friend, Mrs. Flack still speaking, Dickie West lived, and that was where the Bairds are today, the southwest corner of Miami and Marietta. The Normiles house is another railroad house. The downstairs, in the front part of the downstairs was where the post office was located. The rest of the house was the Drescher home. We were envious of one of his friends, Red Shot, because he got to hang the mail in the canvas bag up on the station for the train to catch as it whizzed by. The station must have been 20 feet off the ground, and it had a steel ladder to a platform halfway up. Red would stand on the platform and hook the bag to the top and then to the bottom. The bag had a thick leather belt around its middle where the train hook could make contact. The exact science of this was not dwelt upon by us then, but while writing this, I have figured it out. And of course, some of us, again, probably remember more of the Stegmeyer family, Lee Stegmeyer, who did this. I don't remember Brett Schott doing this. As the train roared through, the mail car door would be open, and out would fly Terrace Park's sack of mail, and the hook would grab the mail to go around the world. Red, who was obviously bigger and stronger than the rest of us, would drag the sack into Mrs. Drescher, and on Friday we would wait for the mail. This was exciting to see, and for us to imagine what was going on in the mail car. Mr. Miller was a sorter who rode and worked in a mail car, and he carried a gun. He had never been robbed, but we knew he was ready if the bandits stepped on board. All from Black Douglas. So, yes, wonderful, wonderful memories of Terrace Park. Then again, through our wonderful Terrace Park mail comes a letter to many of his friends still at 100 years old, a gentleman by the name of Zip Farrell. He writes to his former neighbors, the Bentes often, and I imagine if John Everhart were still alive, he'd probably writing to them also. But just because his effort, and it all comes through Terrace Park Mail, is why I want to share something from him. He just turned 100 years old, and of course, guess who he heard from? Willard Scott, by mail, and a letter regarding my golfing career from Alan Ronofsky. I asked Dick if that was correct in pronunciation. He is the president of the PGA, and as I go on to tell you, you will understand what Zip's credentials and love for golf is. As he is in a retirement home, I believe, in South Carolina? Florida. Okay, I'm sorry, I missed that. He was very excited because at 100, he's still going out and he voted in this last election. So that was something. When he reflects on his life, he did live in Hyde Park for a while, and his dad was an engineer for the North and West Railroad. So I brought this in because, again, that's the railroad, I think, that came through the village. And again, our mail came through them. They lived in Chillicothe for quite a while, and then they moved back to Cincinnati and were in an area called Anchor, but it's really, I think it's the area of Newtown from what Zip says. He lived in the east end of Cincinnati for quite a while, and then he had 2 locations in Milford, Maine, and then on High Street. And the best part about this was he was in the 5th grade when he got to the main street of Milford. But in those days, I backed up, I'm sorry. When he lived in the East End, his mother would take the 4 of them to church every single Sunday, and she'd give them 5 cents. He did not know how she could afford that. So they put 5 cents, well, put 4 cents in the plate because they kept a penny for candy later. Then they moved also, they had a residence at High Street in Milford, which I found very fun to know more about. And it was like a 4-plex, and one of the families was Afro-American. Well, I imagine a lot of their lineage is still there. We were on the leading edge of inclusion, and I love that. A couple of our homes had outdoor plumbing, and we paid $5 a week to the 2 elderly women that owned the unit. Among the various documents, they had, through Milford High School, a stamp book, and they kept like 5-cent stamps in it. I think this, again, came through the post office. I kind of remember something like that. And, of course, then we were all into stamp collecting, too, so that was fun to always go and see what the newest stamps were. He remembers playing down by the Little Miami River, as we did, and he also played on the railroad tracks, as we did. And there was an area at the far end of Yale that was Mr. Slifer's, now owned by the Davis family, and it was called Meadowcrest, and the whole area was meadow and big, huge pine trees, and we'd go and have picnics, or just, that was where we'd hike down there and just have a quiet time, even then. The Village Green was another effort. A lot of us played on the cannons, and then in winter we did a lot of sledding down where Mrs. Pruis is, which was the old Terrace Park Country Club, and indeed Zip did some of the same. In 1935, he began his 41-year career at the Camargo Club. And this year, Doug Posler, who was also, I think he's a former resident of Terrace Park, took his place as manager at Camargo Club and sent many, again, through the mail, heartwarming greetings for his 100th birthday. Now, to this day, the other conclusion on his letter was that he has a grandson that is following in his footsteps of a good, excellent golfer. And he's on some tour, so that is very exciting. Those were pretty much the same, most of what I had to share from some people, except for our final and beloved Rhonda, postmaster for 20-some years, and her anecdotes are precious. I'll pass that around just in case somebody didn't remember Rhonda. One of the things, well, many things she shared with me, and it was just fun to have a conversation, and that's what I thought would be more fun to share with you. Effie, before that flagpole, I guess there were 2 urns, or 1 urn by the corner of the post office that they belonged to Effie, or they were in her memory, but they were planted with pine trees. And the night mail pickup hit it, broke it, and they replanted it. Hit it again, broke it, replanted it. One of the other things that warmed Rhonda's heart were the kids that came in. There were three, that's redundant. There were triplets that came in with their Valentines every year, and they'd come in because it was always cold, so they had their mittens on, they had all these stickers and stamps they wanted to put on, and they always stuck to their mittens. So Rhonda, again, came through and was the rescue of that so that they could get their Valentines in the mail. And she always dressed up on Valentine's Day. I mean, Halloween. And had a basket of candy for all the kids. She was just always doing these things that involved the village and the community and the kids. And I loved her interaction with that. Oftentimes, she helped deliver mail. She always carried dog bones with her, and she had some cute dog stories. One was that she would give the Richies, some of you remember Frank and Inga Richie, I believe. She took the dog bones and gave it to the dog because the dog always greeted her down at the far end of Stanton. And Mr. Ritchie finally said, Rhonda, you know, it's such a nice gesture, but would you please refrain because the dog is putting them in our flower bed and digging up the flowers and so forth. She refrained from that. But then she had another sweet story with Mary, the Davises, big Hayden Davis family down on Winoka, big, huge golden retriever. And Mary would follow Rhonda through that whole delivery route, Winoka, the far end of Oxford Avenue, and so forth. And when Rhonda was done, she'd go back up on Miami Avenue, Mary'd go back home. But every time Rhonda was there, she'd follow her through it. And then one day, she said I could have killed him, but I don't think she would have. A resident came by and saw a young man, a very handsome young man, helping Rhonda get the mail out of the mailbox and into the carts or bags, wherever they had to put it. And he had tattoos on him. Forbid. You know, and this resident went in and she was kind of irate to Rhonda, and with that, the young man turns around and says to Rhonda, Mom, is there anything else I can help you with? I think this resident was a good friend of Rhonda's, so she did not feel humiliated. Vic, another mail carrier that was around for quite a long time, had some stories. I did not reach him, but Susan tells me, my sister, that he has a bed and breakfast somewhere up in eastern, northern Ohio, and he had some stories that Rhonda shared, and I did not make contact with him. Oh, it's Ripley? Oh, along the river.
He's in the Signal House, a big...
Oh, it's historic.
Yes, it's the one that they would signal from there up to the Rankin House for them to take the slaves through.
Oh, what a
And
history
he has,
there.
2 rooms upstairs that have a balcony that people always want because they can sit out on that balcony and look up and down the river.
Oh, how precious.
It's
That's
beautiful.
I guess. Well, that's be a great talk in itself. Thank you. I hope you all heard Virginia on Vic, our former mail carrier. One day, when he was delivering mail on Park Avenue, Barbara Nordlow was locked in her basement. And Vic's coming by delivering mail, and I said, well, how did she get his attention? There was a window in the basement that she was hammering on, and of course he saw her and saved the day, which was quite good. The other thing was after 9/11, everybody was very, very concerned, about what went through the mail. And if anything had a sound to it, they were on guard. And the one morning, there was a package that came from a resident in Terrace Park, and it was ticking. So Vic turned a garbage can over on it, called the police, and waited there until the police came. And when they came, they took the package to the resident from where it had come, and it turned out to be a pager battery. So, again, LA law of Terrace Park was to the rescue, not just the post office. Also, there was a time when you all, and even today, I would see her, because I stuck behind her sometimes coming down Given Road, the lady from the Meshawa Farms in her buckboard wagon. I think the terms are interchangeable. And she had the big horse that almost looks like a Clydesdale horse. But anyway, the one day she always comes down, either gets her mail or wants to have something delivered. And that particular day, a motorcycle was parked outside. And when she went in, the motorcycle started up. And of course, it startled the horse. The horse got loose. Once again, post office calls the Terrace Park police. They come, retrieve the horse and back. Everybody's fine. Everybody's fine. The best part of all, then the one thing that Rhonda did tell us that was probably, she said, the weirdest thing that happened. At that time, Craver Hokum Funeral Home was bringing their cremins, their ashes, down to the post office to be sent somewhere. And she thought, she didn't want to deal with that too much. But anyway, she was always so devoted to the community, and she just always interacted with it. Everybody knew that the mail would go through if Rhonda was there, come rain, snow, whatever. And a couple snowy days, she did stay in the post office, slept overnight, no radio or airbag, and Shelley Cowan was one of the residents that realized this and brought her breakfast the next day, which was just really touched her. And then the other two in conclusion that were so touching at the Terrace Park Post Office, when Rhonda retired, two again of our artists, both of whom are in the Terrace Park Historical Society, Mark Everhart gave the cardinal painting that he did to Rhonda. And then Rosie Shundich also gave one of her paintings that Rhonda said she thinks it's down on the far end of Oxford, so it's probably down along the river, maybe even, I think she might have painted the former Terrace Park Country Club, Mrs. Lewis's house. I'm not sure about that, but Rhonda was so touched, and that's just another way of Terrace Park saying, thank you, Rhonda. Thank you, Terrace Park Post Office. So, end of the lesson, and I hope you all enjoyed the anecdotes more than